Hey there guys, thank you for checking out the video. I'm Desmeric, and in this video I'm going to tell you about this game that I've been following for almost 2 years now. It's called Revenblade. Regardless if you've known about the game or not, I wanted to make a sort of informative coverage type video on this and get it out there as I really enjoy this game and encourage you to give it a look for yourself. This game has done a lot of growing over the time that I've been with it. Hopefully this video does a good job of laying out what kind of game Revenblade is and piques your interest. Revenblade is a third-person hero shooter created by MedallionSlate, a small indie company. Revenblade also has hints of MOBA in its design, what with pushing down a lane to destroy the enemy crystals, along with the typical leveling system of your character and abilities throughout the course of the game. The current game mode of Revenblade is a 5v5 structured match, with each team starting on opposite ends of the map. Both teams have 2 crystals under their control, and in order to win the match, you must take control of all 4 crystals. You do this by heading to a designated control tower and capturing it to lower the defenses of the closest enemy crystal. You could try to throw yourself at the crystal without capturing the tower, but with that tower unclaimed, you'll be pelted with laser beams on top of it, taking significantly reduced damage. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Once you capture the tower, the defenses of the crystal will drop and it will be susceptible to normal damage from basic attacks. You have 30 seconds to damage the crystal as much as possible, if not outright claiming it for your team before the defenses are up and running again. If you successfully deplete the crystal's health, you will have gained control of it and the defenses are instantly restored. From there, you attempt to capture another tower and push to the enemy team's last crystal and take control of it to win the game. Don't forget, the enemy is trying to do the same thing, so don't expect to capture the towers and crystals without a fight. One slip up could have the enemy snipe the tower capture to attack your previously acquired crystal, or buy time for experience and catch up in levels if they're behind. Speaking of, the crystals aren't the only things you can capture. Across the map there are shards to gain control of, and if you successfully do so, you and your team will be awarded with XP. Unless the devs changed it recently, whoever claims the shard gets more experience compared to the rest of the team. You can stall the capture of these shards by holding F while standing near them as someone else is capturing it. If the enemy's team is right behind them, you're more than likely going to eat dirt. There's also a big neutral monster to fight. It spawns around the cliffside after the first crystal is taken. This giant pudgy model is a placeholder for the actual model. When this monster is slain, you and your team get a buff that lets you revive upon being killed. Think of it like Roshan from Dota. MedallionSlate has stated their intentions of reworking and adjusting this buff to be a bit more desirable. It is a little underwhelming compared to the other objectives. With these objectives, it creates an interesting game of not only the towers and crystals, but also managing the shards scattered about to gain experience and denying the shards from the opponent. It all blends together to be a very fast-paced and team-oriented game with a good amount of counterplay with the objectives. It has a nice and tense tug-of-war feeling. The objectives have a bit of skill expression to them in a way. Knowing when to capture the shards or the tower could prove to be pivotal on how the rest of the match plays out. That's how I personally see it anyway. Now for the heroes. Revenblade currently has 9 playable heroes to choose from. Each hero will have their basic attacks, of course, but will also have 4 main abilities. As of right now, there are no special names to the abilities, but they do have a structure of what they entail. Secondary, mobility, heavy, and defensive. Some heroes will also have passives. There are extra effects, or augments as they are known as, that each hero has for their skills, but I won't be going over them in this video. Maybe I'll make a video on the augments? For now, let's go ahead and take a look at the character kits. First up is Vivian, the precise archer. For her basic attacks, Vivian shoots her bow and arrow, dealing damage. The damage is determined by how long you charge the shot, up to full draw, where it deals the most damage. Her secondary lays down caltrops in a small area. Enemies in the caltrops are grounded, meaning you cannot use your mobility skill or jump. This ability, as well as the grounded status, is more impactful than you may think. Her mobility allows her to dash in the direction you hold. You can get some decent height with this one. Her heavy has her shoot out an arrow and it explodes, dealing damage in an area. This ability deals more damage if the targets are further away. Vivian's defensive has her turn invisible for a short period of time. The next 3 shots will heal Vivian for 60% of the damage dealt. Ona, the deadly assassin. First, his passive. Ona has the ability to climb on walls for 1 second before he lets go of the wall. Ona's basic attack has him swiftly swing his katanas, dealing damage with the cleave effect. His secondary allows him to throw a shuriken. If it hits an enemy, they are dealt damage and are marked for a few seconds. Ona can consume this mark with his next attack to deal increased damage. Ona's mobility lets him dash in the direction he is facing, dealing damage to any enemy he passes through. This dash has 2 charges. His heavy has him bring down his katanas, dealing massive damage. His defensive has him assume a parry stance. If an attack is successfully parried, Oni negates all damage and effects from the source and heals himself. Kaizen, the Agile Warrior. While moving sideways in the air, Kaizen lunges in that direction, dealing damage. If he basics while moving backwards, Kaizen will flip and strike with his staff, dealing damage based on the target's missing health. This backflip gives Kaizen a bit more maneuverability and is interesting to see in action. Kaizen's basic attack has him strike with his staff, dealing damage with the cleave effect. Kaizen will also deal increased damage the lower his health is. His secondary has him toss out a bubble, grounding and slowing those inside. His mobility has him fly freely for a short period of time. For his heavy, Kaizen twirls his staff before slamming it on the ground in front of him, damaging and stunning enemies. His defensive gives him increased movement speed and CC immunity during the effect. Bulwark, the hardened tank. His basic has him swing his hook hand, damaging enemies with a cleave effect. His secondary allows him to conjure a stone wall, blocking projectiles. You can also use this to block routes. For his mobility, Bulwark charges a leap, launching him at the target location, damaging and stunning enemies at the location. You can jump pretty far with this. His heavy allows him to throw out his hook, pulling the enemy it hits. Bulwark's defensive has rocks emerge on his body, reducing incoming damage. At the end of the duration, the rocks explode off of Bulwark, dealing damage to surrounding enemies based on how much damage was mitigated during the duration. Layla, the supportive healer. For her basic attack, Layla throws her chakram. It flies forward and backward, dealing damage on both trips. Dealing damage builds energy for her defensive. Her secondary allows her to tether to an ally. While in range, the tethered ally is slowly healed. While Layla is tethered to an ally, as she damages enemies with her chakram, her tethered ally is healed. Layla's heavy has her place down a special gate. Allies who travel through it gain increased movement speed for a short time. While Layla is nearby this gate, she automatically tethers to it, healing herself. For her mobility, after a brief windup, Layla teleports to her tethered ally if within range. If she casts her heavy during the windup, she will instead teleport to her gate if within range. Layla's defensive applies a shield to her and her tethered ally. If Layla has any stored energy, she uses all of it on use, granting more shield. Kaya, the Exquisite Mage. Kaya's passive has her abilities apply marks, applying 1 at a time for a max of 4 marks on a target. If a 5th mark is applied, it consumes all marks and an effect is applied depending on what ability consumed the mark. For her basic, Kaya shoots out an energized crystal, marking the first enemy hit. If a target is already marked, the attack will bounce to nearby enemies. If this attack consumes all marks, it will deal increased damage. Her secondary fires a wave of magical power along the ground. Enemies hit are damaged and are applied 2 marks. If all marks are consumed, this ability will root the targets. Kaya's mobility allows her to blink a short distance forward. For her heavy, Kaya conjures a field of magical energy, dealing damage and applying marks to enemies in the area of effect. Her defensive allows her to encase herself in a crystal. While inside, she cannot be harmed, but also cannot move. You can cancel the ability early by recasting it. You can also use your dash to leave the crystal. Beckett, the Steamed Fighter. Beckett has a resource known as Steam that most of his abilities use. For his basic attack, Beckett swings his hammer, dealing damage with a cleave effect. These basic attacks also refuel some steam. His secondary allows him to spray steam on his enemies, damaging them. If applied long enough, enemies will suffer damage over time. Beckett's mobility has him use the steam pack and fly about, consuming steam. This steam pack is crazy fun to mess with. Beckett spins around with his hammer for his heavy. Enemies hit, suffer damage, and Beckett heals himself and gains steam. Beckett, with his defensive, gives himself a shield. Sadly, there is no effect for it right now. Marcus, the Contentious Shooter. For his passive, Marcus's last shot will temporarily reveal his target. For Marcus, we're going to start with his heavy. It allows him to swap between a rifle and a shotgun, making him a sort of stance changer. For his rifle, Marcus's basic attack fires a short-range shot, with 6 bullets to use before having to reload. For his shotgun, he fires a shell that blasts enemies in a cone. The shotgun has 4 shells. Marcus's secondary skill lets him zoom in with his weapon. While zoomed in with the rifle fires a 2-round burst. Zooming in with the shotgun and firing knocks Marcus and whoever he hits back. His mobility! This skill is Marcus's bread and butter. This allows him to dash forward on the ground and upwards while in the air. This ability has 3 charges. For his defensive, Marcus drops down a healing pad, healing him and allies while in the area. And now Lotus, the Swift Blade. Lotus's basic attacks has her strike swiftly with her daggers, with a cleave effect. After landing 3 basics, her next attack is a spin attack, damaging around her. She also receives a charge for her secondary skill. Speaking of, her secondary skill has her dash forward, damaging enemies in her path. At the end, she does a spin attack, damaging enemies in a wider area. As for her mobility skill, Lotus uses stamina to run faster. While holding down the mobility skill, if you jump, you perform a leap at the cost of some stamina. For her heavy, Lotus dashes to a target with brief invincibility, dealing damage. She may quickly recast this skill to dash to more targets. After a brief period, the targets are dealt more damage based on how many enemies Lotus dashed to. Then there's her defensive. Lotus rewinds herself back to where she was 3 seconds ago. She heals back a percentage of health that she lost in that amount of time. Every one of these characters are interesting in their own way and quite a blast to play. I personally am more of a support player, so I enjoy playing Layla. If I had to pick someone other than Layla, I'd probably pick Lotus. Her kit is very cool and feels great to pull off multiple dashes with her heavy. There are things that are on the way as of the making of this video. For starters, a handful of characters are being cooked up. One I'm really looking forward to is Sakaro, the Water Mage. He was a character about a year or so ago, but was recalled to have some reworks. I'm excited to see how he turns out. We're also getting a dual shield hero named Ophelia and a spear user named Valkyrie. Not much is known about the latter two, but you bet I'm gonna play the crap out of Sakaro. The main map is Royal Gardens, a beautiful green ruin-esque map with a crazy amount of verticality to it. We have the map Glacier coming sometime in the future, a very large map from when we last got to test it, but hopefully it's been shrunk down. There's talk of a 2-lane map, but nothing has really been shared about it. We'll have to see what the devs cook up. With all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed my time with Revenblade. I mean, I've been with the game for almost 2 years at this point. The game has solid potential and the devs are very open to feedback on the game and are very interactive with the community. That's one of my big pluses with this project. I hope this has got you excited for Revenblade. I haven't really done YouTube in a long time, and especially haven't done this kind of video before, so I'd appreciate some feedback. If you're interested in following Revenblade, I'll have a link in the description for the Discord as well as the website. You'll find me mostly active on Twitch, twitch.tv/actualdez. Thank you guys again for watching. Hope to see you soon.